Everyone's talking about reinvention right now, like it's some kind of construction project. They're telling you to become someone new, a new mindset, a new body, a new you. But it often just feels like the harder you work at it, the more fake it starts to feel because they present an assumption that the person you need to become is a stranger to you, that it's someone you need to manufacture out of thin air and out of your hopes and dreams. But I don't believe that anymore. When I have been leveling up, when I've been trying to become some new version of myself, I actually found that the person I wanted to become was already there. Not ahead of me, but just uncovering parts of myself that I had left behind and lost touch with. There was always another version of me underneath all the masks. She was real, she was powerful, and ready for this next chapter. It's just been hidden. So maybe we can stop trying to become someone new and realize this is not an identity shift. This is an identity recovery. This is Unpopular Decisions, where we talk about what it really takes to choose yourself, even when it's not popular. I'm your host, Jameelah Calhoun. If you've been enjoying the stories we are sharing, the best way to support our work is free and takes 10 seconds. Follow or subscribe wherever you're listening. And please leave us a review. It genuinely helps these stories reach the people who need to hear them next. So today it's just me again, and I'm talking about why everything we've been told about reinvention is backwards and what really helped me move forward and feel authentic while doing it. We're in our fifth month of unpopular decisions, and the conversations this season have really shook the table. I am still so moved by our guests and the words of wisdom that they've shared. From Temika, a teen mom refusing to give up on her dreams and settle for lower expectations, to Troy, who was pushed out of his home church as a queer man and had to rebuild his whole sense of identity and his faith, and Molly, who decided to be intentionally child free after playing the caregiver for five younger siblings and as a nanny. I kept coming back to the idea that the identities that we have been acting out for most of our lives are the identities that other people built for us. Those identities are just the stories that we've been told. The stories that have the power to trap us in lives that we didn't choose, or the stories that have the power to liberate us when we finally decide to become the author of our own destiny. So let's get into it. You have heard me talk about that job, the toxic one I stayed in for 18 months, even when I already knew that it wasn't working. And I've told you about everything that I was doing to try and cope and self care my way out of the situation that I should have just left. The yoga retreats, the coaches, the color coded calendar. But even beneath all the coping that I was doing, there was something else happening that I haven't even shared with you guys yet. And if I'm honest, that is actually the real reason why I stayed. I stayed because of who I got to be there. For most of my life, I have been the golden child, somebody that is looked up to for the way that they are the glue, the competent one who always figures things out. I was the person who came home with the star report card, and my mom would share it with all the aunties and the church ladies. I was proud to sit at the adults' table at Thanksgiving, and I was told how mature I was for my age. It felt good to feel above the naivete of other kids, and it felt good to be recognized as smart. If you grew up as the golden child, and a lot of us eldest daughters will relate, then you know that being the person who is relied upon isn't just a job, it's an identity. It's an identity that doesn't just stop when we become an adult and enter the workforce. Instead of being the golden child, I became the golden executive, the person leadership trusted, the person who got the difficult assignments, who was figuring out problems that many others before me had not been able to figure out. And I was getting praised in meetings. I was being promoted. And this is not to say that it was not based on my real hard work and effort, because truly the results speak for themselves and my burnout speaks for itself. We were working hard. But if you've ever been the responsible one, the high achiever, the fixer, you know how addictive that identity can be. And I wish I could say that I finally woke up and made a change because I recognized that I needed to prioritize my health, or I recognized that this was really toxic. No, in reality, it's not just that leaving is scary. The part that people miss about staying and why I stayed was that leaving would mean stop playing a character that I really knew how to play. Who am I if I'm not the one holding everything up? Will people still value me if that's not the role that I'm playing in their lives? The truth is, it took me being pushed out of the golden executive role, not because I was laid off, and I know many people are experiencing that. But the reality is, once I wasn't performing in that specific way that the executives wanted, I was no longer valued. It was after a project went sideways. And tale as old as time, I became the scapegoat. The scapegoat starts getting those menial, disproportionate criticisms. B talked about that in her episode as well, just feeling like there was a nitpicky aspect. And now everyone is compared to you in terms of all the things you shouldn't do. There were literally forums where people were asking if I would be fired since this project did not go the way that the company had expected. And it went from, we couldn't do this without you to, well, we wouldn't have done this without you. And that's where all the blame and shame started to come down on me. It went from, I could do no wrong to, I can't do anything right. It's a fall from grace that I know many people are experiencing because I'm having these conversations with my friends and family. And it's incredibly destabilizing to your sense of self. It's psychologically traumatizing because some of these structures of our identity have been there since childhood. So to have it really quickly turned against us and to feel like there's no way to stem the tide feels incredibly disempowering. But in that moment, you're kind of self gaslighting yourself like it's not happening. How could the same strengths that I was praised for all of a sudden be a liability? You lean in more, you work harder, I basically took on a political campaign internal to the company, trying to rally my supporters. And you tell yourself that it's just one bad apple poisoning the well against me. But eventually, I had to face the truth. It took me a while. And honestly, it took me seeing this story play out for many other people around me with layoffs and other big changes in terms of diversity and other programs that had me recognizing that the seeds of what happened to me had been there all along. Because where there's a golden child, there is always a scapegoat. They are two sides of the same coin. And it's only a matter of time before your number gets called. Because the golden child and the scapegoat are actually the same role. They're both parts that you get cast in by other people. They both make your value conditional on your performance. They depend on somebody else's need and somebody else's story about you. And when the story changes, you move from golden child to scapegoat quick. And let me tell you, one of the hardest things about this is how fast it happens. You don't even have time to change how you're understanding what's happening to you because the vibe and the pylon starts to accelerate so quickly. So I found that the hardest identity to let go of isn't a bad one, that you're ungrateful or that you're always late. The most dangerous identities are the ones that get rewarded. And if you're a golden child right now at your job, church, or community, now is the time to figure out your own script before you get cast in the scapegoat role without your permission. Once I saw it in my experience, I heard it everywhere. And this especially relates to so many of the conversations in our recent episodes. Almost every guest was wrestling with the role they got assigned that they never signed up for. In Temika's episode, Teen Mom to Solutions Engineer, our episode 8 of season 2, she said that her mother didn't just raise her. She built a whole personality for her. Let's listen to what she shared.
Yeah, here's the thing with religion. I never tapped into any of those beliefs. Like, I never signed up to be the purity child. I think it was just what, especially my mother, I think that's what she had envisioned for me. I remember growing up and there's something she would always say about me liking peas. And she was just like, my child is, she loves eating her vegetables. And she didn't know that I was balling up the peas in paper towel and throwing them away.
Hmm.
But she had it in her head that this is my child who loves peas, or this is my child who enjoys going to church and reading scripture, but that's the personality that she built for me. I never signed up for any of that stuff. And I think if she paid attention to me, she would have saw that.
There's always a story of us girls going to school and changing our outfit. Like there's aspects where you're hiding parts of yourself, parts of your personality that you feel are kind of stretching what your parents expect for you. It sounds like that was definitely part of how you coped. Wolf, many people in our life don't actually know us. They aren't paying attention. And yet, they are the people we turn to for advice and approval. And Tamika's words are a reminder that we need to be careful who we let co author our story. And then on the complete other end, Molly, when caregiving stops being your identity, episode 6 of season 2. Unlike Tamika, she wasn't handed an identity built for her. She was handed a void. And she got to adulthood and realized that she had no sense of her own self to point to. So let's revisit her journey.
I felt like I was in this in between space. Like I didn't have an identity. I didn't know who I was. One of the big things that I have a problem with because of being an eldest daughter is the shotgun effect, which is spread yourself so thin so that you're so good in all these other places, but you don't have a pinpointed identity because it kind of feels scary. It is very scary to be in one lane.
100%. I, in general, have always been motivated and raised to keep your options open. You mentioned before that there was an old Molly and you're stepping into a new Molly. What would be the difference between those two versions of yourself?
Old Molly felt like no one cared. No one wanted to help her. Everybody wanted a lot from me, but I could never ask for it back because I was too afraid of what they would want back in return, or that I would always be asked to do something. And if I didn't do it, they would abandon me. That was old Molly. New Molly, or the current Molly, I should say, knows that's not the case. I understand that I'm really good at what I do. I know I'm a good actor. I know I'm a really good singer. I know I'm a really good writer. I know that I have the capacity to do a lot of, and it's not a burden because of the people I'm working with. I'm happy to give, but I also have created a version of me that is allowed to say no. It's not a survival thing anymore. Some of it is being okay with being a little selfish, being okay with taking care of myself.
This idea of the old scripts that we have versus our new selves. In every one of these situations, the change happened when they finally started holding the pen and putting it down to their own paper. It's about taking the writing credits back for your life. I can't resist a framework. So today I wanted to share with you something that I've been reflecting on about identity and what it really takes to start to form a sense of self when you've grown up playing roles that were never built by you. I'm calling this the 4 A's of identity. The first one, I'm calling this the 4 A's of identity. And they go in order from the ones that you have the least control over to the one where you are fully getting to be actualized. The first is your assigned identity. This is the role that you got placed within by your family, by your community, and usually it's early in your upbringing. This is the golden child. This is the scapegoat, the responsible one, the strong one. This is the identity that can feel like home because you've worn it for the longest. The second identity is your achieved identity. This is the self that you've earned. You've earned it through your titles, through the work that you've done, the degrees that you've taken on. But being highly competent isn't just something that you do. It's very easy for it to become who you are. And achieved identities are really seductive because you put work into them. So you should be proud of them. But it still requires you to base your value on performance. And so this is an identity that is rented and not owned. The third identity is your authentic self. This is the self that showed up before anyone else started putting ideas in your head and before they started casting you into other roles. This is the kid you were when there was no audience to perform for, when you hadn't gotten messages about what was the right way to be versus the wrong way to be. You just were. That's the one that is so important as we start to deconstruct the ways that we've been conditioned. This is the identity we're trying to get back to. This is the one we're trying to recover. And the fourth is the one that I feel I've been on a project to step into is your authored identity. This is the self that synthesizes all of those other versions of you, the assigned identity, the achieved identity, and your authentic identity, because you can't take away the experiences that you've had. We'd love to just go back to who we were as a child. But we've had these experiences and we've achieved a lot. And it's important to bring all of those pieces of yourself into something that feels real. This is the craft that you get from the self knowledge and world knowledge that you've gained over the years. And it evolves with you as you move through life. We usually spend most of our life still living out the assigned identity or performing for the achieved self. This authored self is the version of you that you choose to be now. So that's the project that I feel like I'm undergoing, not identity shifting, but self authorship. When I started building Unpopular Decisions, all of this stopped being a theory for me. What does it mean for a woman who spent nearly 2 decades on Wall Street and in tech to start writing and singing and launching a podcast? I literally had an identity crisis about being an influencer. I was like, am I a creative now, a creator? All of those words just did not really sit with who I saw myself as at that point in time. Then I booked my first editorial photo shoot, and it was in a studio with an amazing photographer. She's literally the best. And she asked me, do I have any direction for the shoot? I was literally like, girl, I am not an influencer. I'm new to this. I don't know what that even means. But as soon as the camera came on, I completely relaxed. The shots flowed and it felt so good. After the photos were over, she was just like, don't ever say you're not an influencer. You're a natural at this. I looked at the photos and I really did feel radiant and it did look really natural. But it still didn't click for me. It wasn't until a couple weeks later, I was helping my mom clear out her house as she's moving to Florida and eldest daughter duties again. But between all of the cans of expired goods and those Marshall's finds I already told you all about, I found a stack of old photos of me as a kid. I was doing the absolute most. It was a Halloween night and I'm in my costume. I'm doing the can on the stairs and pose after pose. I was so expressive and unfiltered. And it hit me that the natural the photographer was seeing was actually that version of myself when I was 10 years old. That was the same frequency that I was on when I was doing the most with my cousins. But why didn't I see that version of myself for so long? I wasn't shifting into someone new. I was actually going back into a version of myself that existed before the world started telling me that I was so mature for my age. And the version of myself that existed before I got cast into the golden child or the golden executive. That's when I started to realize that this is not about manifesting something from thin air. And the hilarious part too was when I would tell old friends and colleagues, people from high school, elementary school, that I had started a podcast. Every single one of them, their response is, of course you are. That's so you. And I was like, have you guys been keeping this from me this whole time? Because apparently this version of myself had been hiding in plain sight. Other people could see it in a way that I didn't even recognize. And so it left me with the question of why I struggle to see this version of myself for so long. And I found the answer in a strange place. And again, y'all will have to come with me on this because you know I'm a nerd. And I was listening to a conversation on Ezra Klein's show, and we know he's got some challenges lately, but he had a great conversation with the historian Yuval Noah Harari. He's the author of *Sapiens*, if you guys have ever read that book. But his main theory is that human beings don't actually cooperate based on facts. They cooperate based on stories. That money, nations, religions are all just a set of fictions and stories that we've all agreed to believe in. And that allows us to really see that we have a shared destiny and that there's a reason for us to cooperate with each other. And when I heard this, I immediately thought this is exactly how identities work too. The golden child isn't a fact, it's a story. The responsible executive isn't a fact, it's a story. The person who's not creative, the person who's practical, who's ungrateful, who's too old to start over. These are all stories, and the wrong one at that. But if these are stories, that also means that we have the opportunity to write new ones to drive us towards the actions and the realities that we want to create. This reminds me so much of something that Troy said in his episode after being pushed out of his home church and how that was actually a gift for him.
The people that I thought were closest to me, that had my back, my entire literal faith system was all shaken. And I think that is the greatest gift I've ever received, to know that you could be wrong about anything at any time, that literally everything about what you think is the truth can be wrong. It has built this beautiful, inquisitive curiosity about everything to try to find my own version of truth. Eventually, that led to, well, if they were wrong about that, they also could be wrong about my sexuality. They also could be wrong about who God is. There's a bunch of things they could be wrong about. So it just allowed me to find my own set of values. And if it hadn't happened that way, I might still be in the church to this day, hiding who I am. I don't know who I would have been.
Troy has such a way of putting things. Human beings don't live on evidence. We live on stories. And if the stories aren't the truth, then we get the opportunity to craft our own. Zohra Mamdani recently put a finer point on this on Trevor Noah's podcast, What Now? When we lose our stories, we lose our ambition and we start telling ourselves that the only choice is between settling and sacrificing. He basically says people need stories to create hope and to believe that something greater is possible. So when we actually need to move ourselves, to commit, to make a decision, to take a leap, it's almost never the evidence that does it. Every leap that I've taken, whether it's quitting my job without a plan, betting on this business, ending my marriage, I had to tell myself a story and create a vision of how my life could be better than where I was. And that's the core of betting on yourself, the combination of ambition and imagination. So here's the thing about authoring your own story. We're not asking ourselves to believe in a stranger that we've never met. The evidence already exists and is actually usually in that garage full of old photos. It's the version of ourselves that we need to rediscover and reconnect with. And you have to put down the versions of yourself that you're currently portraying in order to really access that. So, if this is landing for you, I'd love to offer you one activity that helped me feel like I could move forward with clarity and less imposter syndrome because I went and found the evidence from my past. I'm calling this exercise You're Lost and Found, and the center of it is really quite simple. What did you love back then? Not who you were when you got rewarded, not what you're good at, but this is just what you love. So pull out that old photo album, revisit a hobby that you've put down from years ago, reach out to somebody who knew you from way back when, before you became the titles and the person you are today, and say yes to something that sparks your curiosity and makes you feel playful and childlike again. All of those activities are ways that you can reintroduce yourself instead of reinventing yourself. And if you're in the middle of a pivot, an identity retrieval, a career change, figuring out what's next, I am hosting my first ever open house. It's called Pivots Live, Positioning Your Next Chapter. I've pivoted my career across 6 industries and 6 functions, and I've taken 2 year-long career breaks without derailing my growth. I want to share what I've learned through all of those experiences. So through live case studies, Q&A, and of course, my frameworks that I can't resist, I would love to have you guys join me for a live conversation where we can expand what feels possible for all of us. The link is in the show notes, and follow me on LinkedIn to get more of my perspective. Well, That's it for this one. If something in this episode stayed with you, I don't think that's an accident. It usually means that you're starting to write your own truth. Before you go, make sure to follow and subscribe to Unpopular Decisions wherever you get your podcasts. And please send this episode to someone else who's in the middle of shedding those exhausting roles that they've been assigned. They might just need permission to go back instead of forward. Also, we'll be taking a 1 week break next week for the 4th of July holiday in the States. And during this time, we'll bring you a replay episode from season 1. Javon Cameron made a big career pivot from education into tech. And the catch was she kept it a secret from everyone. Find out why and how that impacted her next week. We're on a mission to spark 1 million brave life choices, and recovering who you've always been is one of them. So thank you for listening, and I'm glad you're here.